Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Exercise Mechanic Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about what to do when life punches your clients in the face, how to coach your clients when life gets messy. I am joined by Ryan Taylor and Brett Patterson. So, gentlemen, welcome. Today, we were kind of brainstorming about, various challenges that clients face and things that can ultimately kind of like knock them off course. And we were able to kind of break these things down into three major categories of obstacles, both internal and external, associated to the client and then also associated to the trainer. Category one being psychological and emotional barriers. Category two being lifestyle and environmental factors that get in the way of client success. And then the third category being programming and strategy gaps, essentially moments when the trainer has dropped the ball, so to speak, and unfortunately the client is on the receiving end of low motivation, low results, etc. And so why don't we kick things off? Initially, what started this conversation was because there's lots of vacations and holidays coming up, wanting to talk about how can we set our clients up for success so that they can still succeed while also concurrently, navigating those various kind of like external or environmental challenges well. So we'll start perhaps with the lifestyle and environment category, and we'll start with specifically the challenge of how to navigate holidays and vacations. And so, you guys, how do you guide your clients through those various chapters so that they can ultimately, still get what they want in terms of the end goal of their goals?
First step I find is usually to just set up a plan and a schedule because it's easy enough to say, yeah, I'll have time to work out over my holiday and then just leave it at that. And then you get to it and days are full and it passes you by. So just saying, okay, every day at 8 a.m. I've got this time blocked off for my workout. Here are my, 2 or 3 workouts that my trainer has given me. So take some thought out of it. And there's less room at least for excuses or just putting it off if you block off that time. Big fan of schedules.
Mm-hmm. Agreed, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would even take a step back first and like establish like what is the specific goal and need of that client. So are we talking about, Paul who's 75 years old and trains with you twice a week kind of thing and he's going on vacation with his wife? Or are you talking about, the high level runner or bodybuilding competitor, whatever? So I think that frames some of that conversation. I would completely agree with Brett that I think having a schedule initially is helpful, but I would start with kind of that assessment of who's that individual and like how important is it, first of all, to have like a rigid schedule during their holiday, and like does that fit? So for me, I think of the holiday like it is a break for that person in the sense that like they should come back from their vacation rested in some capacity, and them having a tighter schedule for training and diet, is that going to cause more stress? Is them having like complete free will and like no structure, is that going to be more stressful? So like there's a little bit of like an assessment there ahead of time of just like what suits that client's individual needs. Something that I like to do is have an idea, what is their gym access going to be like if they know ahead of time? Like, do they have pictures of the resort gym or the gym that's near their Airbnb, whatever happens to be? And then we'll try to construct a workout that's relatively analogous to the one that they've already been performing. And then similar to kind of like how I would approach, meals out with a client or cheat meals or something like that. Because I do want, they should enjoy their vacation. Like I want people to have a good time and not feel like they're a slave to their fitness goals during the week away. So we can work on something where it's like, hey, like you're going to go out for dinner every night on vacation. So like, let's maybe strategize like the meals that you're just having at the buffet or whatever, assuming this is like a, say, an all-inclusive resort. Let's pick a couple of food groups that you would want to load up on, have a treat here and there, but it's like kind of just teaching people like habits and then like save yourself some room. If this is something that matters to you, save yourself some room where it's like when you go out for sushi or Italian food at night, you can just have that meal completely guilt-free. And then I would say the last thing is, I think that especially in vacation, steps are such a powerful tool.
Yeah, for sure.
So many, and like so many people are going to be walking around anyway, that I actually think a lot of the time, the increase in activity, walk around the resort, or like I've had clients where they go to Italy and they walk 25,000 steps a day for a week. Their activity is so high that it kind of offsets some of that increase in like social and fun eating. So, I think it's like steps are a really useful tool, like a loose framework around food. And then I personally really like the idea of, as Brett said, set a workout schedule, and then just like know what they have access to ahead of time.
Yeah, I love that. Do you mind if I jump in there, Brett?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one thing I find so interesting is that there's parallels and common themes within, like, I haven't said what I want to say, but when you guys are talking, I'm like, yep. And I do things a little bit differently, or there's this other extra kind of consideration, which I find just so useful about these conversations, is that common themes, but also various manifestations of how these things are applied. And I agree with what both of you guys said entirely. What I'd like to add to that is that this is, and perhaps it's self-evident, but this is a conversation that I have with the client, and it's a decision that we make together. So to your point, Rye, and actually it's interesting, one of my clients recently it went on vacation to an all-inclusive resort, I think in Mexico. And I asked her, she's a client who has rheumatoid arthritis. And for her, historically, exercising on a regular basis has really helped keep her symptoms at bay. And it's also really helped with her headspace. And so the conversation leading up to this vacation was like, well, listen, like what would enrich your life the most? Like, do you want to have like, your 4 workouts that are going to be, let's say 40 minutes to an hour each when you're down there? Or do you want to intentionally take your foot off the gas a little bit so that way you have more time and perhaps more kind of cognitive bandwidth to just spend time with your kids? And interestingly, she thought about it and she was like, you know what? I actually want to have like a week like break. And I was like, perfect, no problem, and understanding that if she changes her mind when she's down there, she can send me a message and I can upload something for her, no problem. But I think that that's an important thing, because if we're thinking about, like we've talked about so many times on this podcast, that like client adherence is so massively important. When clients are a part of that decision-making process, I mean, they're more bought into the solution, generally speaking, in contrast to if it's just imposed on them. So that's really the piece that I would add. And I guess the final piece to that would be, if I feel like what they're kind of proposing runs counter to their objectives. Like for instance, if you have an athlete who's peaking for a show, you have an athlete who's peaking for an event, and they're going on vacation when they're supposed to have their last really hard training session. Like in the case of my marathon that I had a few weeks ago, it's like, I kind of don't care you're going on vacation. You have 34K to run. Like that's just like tough, Then if the client doesn't do it, then they don't do it, and that's their decision. But I do try to make those decisions with clients, asking them like, how do you want your vacation to go? And then structuring things around there, because like you said, right, them coming back from the vacation, generally speaking, you want them to be refreshed.
Yeah. So I have 2 thoughts on that. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Feel free to jump in and interrupt us, Brett. Twice. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy.
Go for it.
The thing that you said there about, making that decision together, I love. And for myself, that actually extends far beyond the vacation conversation.
For sure.
That's actually become a part of the initial dialogue that I have with a client when I'm starting with them. Is I will say to them, like, in my eyes, this coaching relationship is not a dictatorship, it's collaborative. Mm-hmm. So you're obviously hiring me for some reason, whether that is like
your good looks, your charm.
It's definitely not that. Whether that's like outsourcing just the executive decision making, so on and so forth. Like, I'm comfortable being the one that helps guide a decision. But I often like those decisions happening collaboratively. I think that, I don't have so much of an ego to think that there aren't things that maybe I don't consider. And I'm very lucky that, a lot of my clients themselves are within the fitness industry, so they have valuable information. And as you said, I think people are more engaged when they feel like they are a part of that decision-making process. And then I think one just like small note, kind of anecdote that I want to add to this is, I think it's important to understand like there isn't one solution for these situations. I think it's learning like what are the main priorities for this client? Like you said, is your life more enriched if you stick to your training schedule that week, or is it more enriched if you take a week off? Like knowing all this stuff ahead of time and then being able to find solutions to like nail those big pillars. So like I have a client that travels frequently for work. She was away for 3 weeks down in the States, wanted to train regularly, all of that stuff. She was staying in an unfamiliar place, so she didn't really have the same access to cooking. So like we found a meal prep service, something along those lines, right? So I think it's just like, in my eyes, your role is to be a part of that problem solving so that with whatever situation they happen to be in, they have solutions to keep them mostly on track.
Love that. Brett, go.
I mean, I've wanted to say this since Ryan brought it up, but as the parent of a toddler, the idea of a vacation being like restful is hilarious. It's just like, there's a joke online that vacations when you've got a child is just parenting in another location without all of your stuff.
Right.
It's never easy, but like, it is nice to get away. We're making memories. It's great. But honestly, the first day back to work is like, oh, finally I can relax.
That's interesting.
Which, I mean, if you've got clients who are parents or parents of young children, you can definitely take that into account. Like they're probably going to be running off their feet. They're still getting up at 6 a.m. or whenever their kids get up. It might not be that restful, and you might need to take that into account for those particular clients. I really like the idea of bringing the clients into the decision, and it's something I do with the training I do with clients, but it's also something I do with the ski team, because it is a university ski team. These are legal adults for the most part on the team. And so I try to bring them into the fold. Most of our board are members of the team, and try to involve them in all these decisions, because it is in the end their progress. And so I want to take their choices into it. So yeah, it's something I use a lot. And like, for certain clients, like I've got one client who usually her vacations are like climbing a mountain somewhere. So we're not going to be adding, much extra work to that. Like she's already, climbing Kilimanjaro. There's no need to do some extra push-ups on top of that. So
I disagree. I completely disagree. Yeah, tell her to do push-ups on Kilimanjaro. Come on.
As long as your head's facing down the hill, you make them nice and hard.
That's right. That's right.
I'm going to use this as a mini rant because I see this online a lot. Because Brett, you mentioned the kids thing. If you're a coach, and I feel like I only really see this with coaches who are 21 to 25, maybe
21-year-old health life coaches.
Yeah.
Is that what yeah. Okay. I'm so excited.
I hate when people pull the bullshit of like we all have the same 24 hours. There's no excuses just because you're a parent. Yes, we all have we all live in a 24-hour world, but I think like great job alienating your client, because like they're probably not going to pick the gym over their kids. And Brett, you're the only one that has children out of the three of us here. I'm just going to throw it out there. I assume that there's times that your training and nutrition takes a giant fucking backseat because you have a kid.
I mean, the amount of boxed mac and cheese I've eaten in the last 2 years.
Exactly.
Like, whatever. It's calories. I try not to like demonize food, but like, yeah, definitely. Or like, I'm skipping meals because like we're super busy, or, last week when he was homesick, I had to skip a workout to take care of him. I try to fit it in when I can, but like it's never perfect.
Yeah. Like I think of, especially in the beginning, I don't know a lot of parents that get a good night's sleep for the first while. we all know like how important sleep is for training and recovery. So it's like, no, we don't have the same 24 hours because those people are up 5 times in the middle of the night and they're not getting the same sleep that you are when you sleep in your mom's basement. Anyway, there's my end rant. Don't do that to your clients.
That was way more PG than I was expecting. There were no F-bombs
I was holding
in there.
back a little bit.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't at all.
I remember when my guy was like 10 days old or so and going into the like drugstore to get some formula. And I remember staring at the wall of formula, being a bit overwhelmed, and then starting to see the whole wall of formula start to like pulse back and forth, like hallucinating from lack of sleep. And I was staring at it going, oh, that's new. And then I thought, oh, I drove here. Maybe driving in this state is not the safest thing in the world. But so, yeah, especially in those first few months, like you gotta be a bit kind to your clients.
Man, you know, I love that this topic's coming up because this seems like another yes and moment. Yes, objectively, we have the same 24 hours during a day, so to speak, in terms of just time. Like you have the same amount of seconds, totally. But then if we consider, you know, like how would I say, like environmental considerations, for instance, we're talking about a young kid, but also if we move outside of that specific example, we talk about other like socioeconomic challenges, like folks who don't have as much money, or because of that affects where they live, or their ability to get from A to B in, you know, in an efficient manner, or access to food. It's just like, well, yeah, sure. Like objectively from a second by second basis, you have the same amount of seconds, but the context and the quality of all of it is entirely different. And so like when people say that kind of stuff, all it shows is that they're just completely ignorant to the reality of the world. And like you said, Ryan, like it's just dumb because it ultimately is going to end up alienating a whole bunch of people that fundamentally need help. And you know, they'll probably exclusively just get people who believe in that kind of very delusional view of the world, and their life is going to be an echo chamber, which, you know,
I would imagine at some point that 21-year-old, I mean, on the topic of this conversation, life is at some point probably going to punch them in the face.
Knock on the door. Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, it's probably going to be a pretty traumatic event, but with any luck, they come out of it going, oh, maybe it isn't the same 24 hours.
No doubt.
Well, and like,
so,
I was just going to say, like, I remember because I was 20 years old when I started as a trainer. And my first consult I ever had was a 6 a.m. with like a middle-aged single mom. And she cried at the table because she was like doing something for herself. And I had no capacity to understand what that was like because I hadn't lived any experience that was even similar to that. And it is one of those things where, and I don't, you know, it's not always about age. But I think at least being cognizant of the fact that like you might not have the same life experiences as the people that are sitting in front of you. So just being compassionate to that. Mm-hmm. At least now, you know, my life experiences are not the same as a 45-year-old mom, but I can at least like empathize with that situation better than I could at that stage. So I just think if you are that young trainer, just know that like you kind of don't have the whole world figured out. And at least like just take a step back and like have a little bit more compassion for those people that are in more difficult situations than you are.
No doubt. Yeah. Compassion and curiosity, right? Curiosity drives like really effective problem solving, especially in like, you know, client dynamics. So if we think about, okay, how do we navigate holidays and vacations? We talked about a variety of different things. Number one, getting total clarity of like, what are the goals of the client? And then also perhaps at least maybe having a general idea from our perspective of like what might be ideal for this person based off of what they've hired me to help them accomplish. Perhaps that could be maybe like a good place to start. And then the second would be to then, when you start having this kind of conversation with the client about setting things up for holidays and vacations with the aim of having a plan, like you mentioned, Brett, about making that plan with the client. So that way you can benefit from their understanding of what's going to be going on. You can blend in like what are their priorities during their vacation, and how do we potentially reconcile their goals, and which might be like more long-term priorities or short or medium term, with like the short-term priority of the vacation, perhaps. And like, when you reconcile those two things, what's the outcome that you choose is best? And then perhaps the third part of that would be, then once that's clear, of like, okay, this is going to be the general idea of what we're going to be doing, then making something concrete. So, does that look like, here's your mobility work during this week, and that's it. We just want you to feel good. Is it, you still want to train? And so we're going to just bring you to maintenance volume, and we're going to find you a gym that's within range of the hotel. Maybe it's bodyweight exercises in your hotel room, which, funny story, one of my clients just not long ago went to Poland for vacation, and in Krakow, actually, which apparently is a really nice city. Last time he was there, I gave him bodyweight workouts that had like plyometrics in it and stuff. And then we were planning for this recent vacation. He was like, I can't do plyos because I got complaints from the people sleeping beneath me, because it's an old building. And he was like, I ended up doing my plyometrics in the bathroom last time. I don't want to do that ever again, like on the tile. And I'm like, sure, man, no problem. Like, we can absolutely just get rid of your plyos. It's fine. But, just making sure that it's a collaborative thing, because ultimately it increases the likelihood of success. When, other than those three major categories and those considerations, is there anything else you guys would add to that before we move to our next topic?
I mean, I could talk for a while about this, but like, yeah, I think that those are kind of like the main points. Our family spends a decent amount of time at our cottage, and I usually, the car is packed absolutely to the roof, so there's no room to like for me to bring like kettlebells or anything like that. So usually just trying to do what we can with the stuff that's there. So like, there's usually some big rocks around, got some things to do like pull-ups on. There's a video on my Instagram of me doing Cossack squats, holding my 6-month-old child as a counterweight. There are definitely options. You might have to be a bit more creative, but there's options if the location or whatever it be is limited for the client.
Love it. Right.
Yeah. One thing I would actually add, popped into my head, is if you've got clients who like regularly take supplements, because, if you're going somewhere for a week, it's a pain to, like, you're not going to buy everything there and then have all this extra stuff, whatever it happens to be. So one strategy that I have used myself and I really like is, what I would do is I take little Ziploc bags and I'll put, because I take more than what would fit in one of those little day things. I don't know what you'd call it, like pill cases. If you've got a pill case that you can fit it all in, great. Mine, unfortunately, is like dozens of stuff. Mm-hmm. I will put all of that in little mini Ziploc bags, like for each day, so I've got them. The other thing, again, this is like not the case for the majority of clients that people will work with. I will say, because this is a conversation that's come up just specifically with the demographic that I work with, if you work with a client who's on the enhanced side of things, travel is complicated. Mm-hmm. And I would say, if you can, plan travel around PED cycles. It just will make your life significantly easier. If that's not possible, learn the laws of the country that you're going to. I don't want to say too much on that, but I think, in my opinion, it's not worth being reckless. Don't break the law. Don't get caught breaking the law. Not worth that. You're better off just like, if something popped up and it's an inconvenient time, so be it. Like, shit happens. It's not the best case scenario, but it's a lot better than getting arrested.
That's good. I agree. I 100% agree. I'd like to transition us into psychological and emotional barriers that some clients experience, because I think that this is definitely a really huge category. Some of the notes that I have jotted down here that we had discussed before, where, let's say clients that are struggling with low motivation or low self-belief. Another really big one that you had mentioned earlier, Brett, was navigating mental health challenges, or like a mental health low. And then Rye, you also mentioned re-engaging disengaged clients. And there's a lot more that we could say here, but let's just start talking about, let's say you have a client who's struggling with their mental health acutely or chronically, and or they're having low motivation. How do you guys broach those things?
What's your expression, Etienne? Action alleviates anxiety.
Action alleviates anxiety, correct. For a moment, it froze there, and I'm like, I'm a little confused, but yes, absolutely.
In cognitive behavioral therapy, they talk about mood follows action. Same idea is just like, it's the hardest thing to do. It's going to be the hardest thing to do for your client, but as best as you can, just to try to get them moving in some way. And hopefully there will be a momentum growth from that small movement, but it doesn't have to be a lot. Like, if your client is struggling to get out of bed, they're certainly not going to be ready for a 2-hour like monster workout. So if you can at least get them like, on the treadmill for 15 minutes or doing like 3 sets in the morning, something like that, something to just like build off of. I think that is really, really important, more than just kind of like shaming them for not being able to get there, just like little bits that we can build off of, baby steps.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the way I would frame it is like setting people up for success to have wins. So if the expectation is like, as you said, maybe it's not a 2-hour workout, but it's like a 30-minute workout of exercises that they enjoy, like they, still get to take action. And we also know, just the power of exercise for mental health. And they have an opportunity, like the thing that they did was they killed a workout and get to leave feeling like a success. Not they went in with the expectation of their normal, workout of like 8 exercises that they kind of did 5 and then they feel shitty. So I think setting them up for success ahead of time. I think the other thing, honestly, that I think of with this, because I think if you just work with people, like people go through a variety of things in their lives, right? It would be naive to think that you're not going to have these kinds of conversations with clients. You should expect to have you should expect to have conversations with their clients that are just very human, that aren't related to their training. So sometimes I think the thing that can be the most helpful is just being somebody in a support role, like kind of as a friend, depending on the relationship you have with your client. But, this is work that is quite intimate. So I think if it's necessary and if it's appropriate, maybe the thing that can help, and I would just say, like, in addition to what Brett had already mentioned, is like just have like a caring conversation with them. If they're a local client, like maybe take them out for a coffee, whatever it happens to be. So I think that those things, they might be like outside your job description, but they're a good thing to do as a compassionate human being. And if you wanted to think of this exclusively from a selfish standpoint, think of the level of trust that you build with a client and how cared for they feel. They're a lot more likely to stick with you as a client when you've demonstrated to them the amount of support that they can get from you.
Yeah, I love that. Brett, is there anything that you want to reflect back?
Just to bring up like an individual client that I went through. I was training a couple who were probably around 60 years old. Right. I think we started right at the start of the pandemic and we were exclusively online to begin with. And the husband of this couple had a pretty kind of like a pretty high level position where he was managing a lot of people, and his job was kind of to coordinate people and events and be pretty social. And obviously, like in the pandemic, there was none of that. As best as he could, he was keeping in touch with his staff, but he just felt very, very isolated. And I know it took a lot for him, but him and his wife came to me and, one week and were like, he's really struggling. I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to meet this week, which was no problem. But it takes some vulnerability to be able to do that, especially, recognizing that an older client who's got a job like that, probably a bit harder too, to be vulnerable with, at the time I was in my young 30s. But it kind of opened up the conversation, and when they were just here for a little while when they left the country. It was a pretty emotional departure, and like this husband gave me like a great big hug and had tears in his eyes. He's a pretty stoic guy, and it was kind of a surprise to me at the time, how emotional he got when he was saying goodbye. And then reflecting on it afterwards, it was like, oh yeah, we did have this, years before, we did have this pretty unique and strong moment where he was very vulnerable, and just kind of like work through it bit by bit. But it was cool to have that experience.
Good on you, man. And I mean, that's a really great example of just like the reality of our work, where it's like, fundamentally our clients are people first, and human beings. You can seem as stoic on the outside, but like we're all gooey, on the inside. I forget where I heard that once, and it was in a movie, but it landed. Thank you for sharing that, man. That's really great. I agree with everything you guys said. I don't feel like I have much to add, except for perhaps 3 kind of practical things that I tend to do. Number one, I find that there tends to be a lot of shame around mental health challenges, like as if they're not hard enough, And a part of the reason why there's a lot of shame is that people are just not aware of how common these challenges are. So the first thing that I really try to do is I try to really just open their eyes to the reality, which is that like the vast majority of people struggle in some way, shape, or form. And it is completely common for us in our roles to have conversations like this with our client. Like, you are not the broken one that's in my roster because you're struggling with this stuff. And there's like a diagram that I always use, and it's on like Google Images. If you Google like expectation versus reality, and it's like clients think it's going to be this beautiful like linear line, and in reality it's like ups and downs with like ravines and sharks and fire and death, and then and then you get to the finish line. And clients, when they go through these lows, they can often feel like they're stepping backwards. But if you look at this diagram, the dip is actually forward. Like this is a normal part of this process as you're moving forward, that you are going to have these moments of despair, these moments of self-doubt. And that's something that I bring up when clients are struggling with their mental health. But also it's something that I use usually in sales conversations as well, when we're setting the stage for the journey. Is I'll talk about this. That's like, it is not going to be smooth. At some point, we're going to be having this conversation again, because life is going to punch you in the teeth, So that's the first note that I had, is normalizing struggling as a means of kind of getting rid of shame. I find that really powerful. And then the second piece kind of ties into, I can't remember if it was yourself, Brett, or you, Rye, that mentioned this notion of just like bringing it down to something they can do. That's a conversation that I have with my clients. Is it's like, great, like I understand that you're having trouble with these things. Let's give the client a fictional name, like let's say Chris. Chris, like I understand you're struggling, but like, so all this being said, after you hear them, asking them, what can you do? Like, and let's start with that. So maybe it's 5 minutes a day. Fantastic, no problem. Let's do that. Then normally what I'll do is I'll have like that small commitment of 5 minutes. That's what they hold themselves to, as kind of like, this is what I hold myself to on daily basis, or 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And then they have an add-on, which we kind of call optional work, where if after your 5 minutes, if you want to stop, you can, because you've held yourself to your commitment, and you can be really proud of that, because right now things are really difficult. And if at that time you'd like to continue, here's some extra. So that way you don't need to worry about trying to figure that out. So they have their minimum commitment and they've got some extra work. I personally found that quite useful. It doesn't work with everybody, but I have found that useful. And then my last,
if you mind me interjecting specifically on that point, it reminds me of, I don't know if this was actually like a clinical thing or if it was just some guy on the internet who kind of sparked this, but it was his theory on like non-zero days. When you're in like the pits, we just don't want to have a 0 day where you're getting nothing done. whatever it might be. It might be just doing the dishes or making your bed or taking a shower. That's a win, and we can call it a win. And when you go to bed that night, you can say, hey, I didn't have a 0 day. I did, A, B, or C. So you're not feeling like you're completely failing, and we can kind of treat that as a little win.
I love that, man. That's a really great model. Thank you for sharing that. I like that a lot. I'm going to steal that
your
one.
last point.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And then the last thing, honestly, is medication. I've had some clients that like are just beating their head against the wall, trying to do things the way that they believe they should, in contrast to asking for help, whether it be asking for help from a therapist or seeking help via pharmacology. Like a really good friend of mine who I would say one of the most positive people I've ever met, at one point went through a really dark chapter in her life. And she tried to like grit her teeth and work through it, but then eventually it was like, fuck, I'm just having a lot of trouble moving forward. And so I'm going to bring in some help. And so she ended up hopping on, she spoke to her doctor, of course. She ended up hopping on like a low dose of an antidepressant of sorts. And it took the edge off of her being able to do health promoting things like eating well, sleeping well, exercising, engaging with fulfilling work. And interestingly, she took the medication, she was able to do what she had to do. And then things got better and she weaned herself off and things are fine, So I am a fan of using medication, of course. I mean, I think it depends on the person. It needs to be a conversation they have with their GP, but I think it should be a part of the conversation as well, especially if like people are really struggling and things aren't working. Like, don't hesitate to reach out and leverage the resources available.
If we're talking about the same person, I made a point to talk to her last time we were together about how important that she shared that and was like totally open and made quite a number of social media posts about it. Mm-hmm. And I had some clients that actually followed her and made a big impact on them too. Like, oh, this person who is in incredible shape, seems to have their life totally figured out, is struggling too. Like, it's not just me. That was really powerful.
Yeah. And like you're saying, like one of the big reasons why these moments can be so impactful is then people no longer feel alone. And they look at these people that like, oh, you seem like you have your life figured out. But in reality, that person feels like they're crumbling on the inside, just like we do on occasion, So, yeah. Anything else you guys want to add? I mean, there's a lot that we could talk about here with psychological and emotional barriers.
I feel like this is a whole other podcast episode someday in the future.
Totally. Okay. Well, I know that we've got a time constraint. We've got to wrap in 12 minutes. So why don't we talk about how have you guys, has it ever happened to you where a client loses motivation because you fucked up? and what I mean by that is like, maybe you are erring on the side of caution with their program because you want them to be adherent for the long game. And so you opt for something that's not very stimulative and easy to do. Usually this has to do with nutritional approaches, I find. And then the client doesn't lose weight and they fall off the wagon because they experience a low of motivation, or perhaps the other side of things where you're like, all right, let's get some results quick. And you hammer them with something really aggressive and it's unsustainable. And then they fall off the wagon. Have you guys ever experienced that? And then if so, how did you navigate it? If you haven't experienced that, how would you navigate it?
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody's probably been faced with that at some point. Again, like if you've been in this industry long enough, like you've made mistakes. Like I think of the first diet plan that I ever went through with a client. Like if I look back at it now, I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? That was terrible. And if you don't feel that way about your career, then you're not learning anything.
Yeah.
So with that being said, so the short answer is like, yeah, of course. Like, and I would say I probably continuously make some kind of errors now. I think a lot of it to me can be resolved with just constant communication. So that goes back to that like collaboration piece. Mm-hmm. So I think constantly touching base with clients about how they're feeling, how engaged they are, etc., so that you can pick up on if something is going wrong right away. I think usually if something goes awry for very, very brief period of time, it's not that big a deal. So long as like you pick up on it and, you know, you talk about it with your client, you address it, you change the plan, whatever it happens to be. I think it's when there are issues, you know, as you had said, like maybe your client doesn't like whatever nutritional intervention you're doing and you don't talk about it for weeks. And then they either are grumpy about that, they stop following it, whatever it happens to be, or they think their workout is too easy. So they start to go off track with, like, they start adding things in there that wasn't in there. So all those things can happen. I think the bigger issue is when they're just left unaddressed. So I think the first thing is just really keeping tabs on what's going on with your clients and being consistent about that. To be honest, like every couple days at a minimum. Again, I'm speaking more from like the online world at this stage. I don't personally see the online coaching model where people check in once a week, once a month sometimes. I don't see that being very successful. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, like, you can look up a diet on ChatGPT. You can look up a training program on ChatGPT. So where your power comes as a coach is your ability to navigate these problems, support your clients, etc. So I think that needs to lead to more frequent touch points, even if they're very brief. And then I think the last piece, so that to me is the really important thing. It's just pay attention. Mm-hmm. Inevitably, because I think that's the way to look at this. Inevitably, when there is something that's misaligned, address it. And then I would say take accountability if it's your fault. Honestly, even if it's not your fault, kind of take accountability. So yeah. Even if it's something where, like, I know for a fact that, like, my client did a thing because this is a habit that they always do and it doesn't serve them and they're getting in their own way, I will still take accountability in some way where it's like, you know what, like, this is something that I should have, like, we should have talked about this before, like, whatever it happens to be.
I agree.
Even if it is kind of their fault, I think that there's more power in you in the coach/trainer role, taking accountability for whatever is going on that's not aligning with ultimately is the client's goal.
Mm-hmm. I have one follow-up comment on that. I love what you said there, Rye. You know, you touched on, like, the importance of feedback, and one of the lessons I've learned over the years is, like, never assume that your clients will tell you. Like, never assume that they will open the door. You need to actively open the door, and sometimes you need to table, like, you need to give them, like, a lob for them to give you feedback, like asking them specifically what, not like, are you happy, but asking specific questions like, what don't you like about what we're currently doing? What don't you like about the nutrition plan? Of course, tell me what you like, but, like, also I'm going to ask you, like, specifically, what are you not enjoying about your training, your nutrition plan, etc. I found that to be really useful. Even, you know, if we think about this in another context, like, for instance, like the classes that we teach, the programs that we run. If you just ask clients, like, oh, how was that? Oh yeah, it was great. Thank you so much. And blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no. Like, what did you dislike? Which parts would you want to remove? Were there any parts of the class that were redundant? Like, was there anything that you felt was just not relevant? Tell me, right? And unless you, like, specifically give them prompts, like, for sure, I'm the type of person whose brain thrives on prompts. And I'm fairly certain everyone's like this, but certain people, I think, to a greater degree. Shout out to ADD. But if you give someone a prompt, then they might actually be able to give you the valuable information. And so I find that to really, really, really important. Like, giving them a lob is very useful, and not assuming that they'll open the door themselves.
Yeah, Rye, you mentioned taking accountability, and I think it flows really nicely into kind of removing the client from the problem in emotionally, and just, I try to do this in parenting and in my relationship too. It's me and you versus a problem.
Yes.
It's not me versus you. And so, sort of removing them emotionally from it, you bring them into the fold, and together we're going to sort out what this problem is. It's not me trying to fight you on this thing. And suddenly both of you guys are working collaboratively.
100%. It's something that we talk in our courses a lot, this idea of like never compromising the therapeutic alliance. And especially like when it comes to like rehab modules, whether it be in the internship or the rehabilitation course that we're launching, like that's such a huge theme. I'm so happy you brought that up, Brett. And what's also really fun about this is that this absolutely applies outside of training as well. You think of like conflicts in relationship where it's like, it's not me versus my partner. It's me and my partner versus this problem that we're experiencing outside of us, or me and a friend against a conflict, like, whatever it may be. So I love that. I'm really happy that you brought that up.
I see the opposite in a lot of like old school ski coaches, in that like an athlete will be coming down a training course, not adapting to a skill or an environment that the coach has set, and they get down to the bottom and the coach just starts laying into them. And like the athlete is already upset with themselves because they know they're not getting it. What do you think just like giving them more pressure is doing? Instead, if we take a step back and say, okay, we're clearly having some issues, adapting to this skill. What do you feel that you need in order to get it? Do we need to slow it down? Do we need to change the set? Whatever it means. But like, we're working together to solve this problem. It's not like, how dare you not acquire this skill as quickly as I like. If anything, I feel like, if your athlete is coming down run after run and not getting a thing, that's on you as a coach. Like, that is not the athlete's issue. If it's, the athlete's putting everything that you see together and still not getting it, that's something that you need to adjust as a coach. And I think the same thing could apply to training. If like, your client is coming in and seems to be doing all the things you're asking and still is not making progress, that's on you as a coach to start to look inside and say like, oh, okay, time to make some adjustments here.
Funny enough, this actually reminds me of this. I think we had like an assembly when I was in like grade 5, and this has stuck with me. And I think it's something that, we're talking about essentially navigating accountability conversations and challenging conversations with clients. We touched on this a little bit before we started recording, but there's actually somebody, Aram, who we had on here before, something that I really liked that he talks about, because he's an incredibly empathetic person. And even his tough love conversations come from a place of empathy. Mm-hmm. And that like comes across. And what I was referencing, this assembly from when I was a kid, I can't even remember who put this on. Some motivational guy came to our school.
21 years old. Telling you that you only had
we all the same 24 hours.
Same 24 hours, yeah.
But they had somebody go up in front and they blindfolded them. And the first thing that we did, because they had to find, it was like a balloon or some shit like that. And they had everyone in the audience boo when he wasn't facing the right direction. It took this guy fucking forever to find the balloon. Mm-hmm. And then we switched it and we had everyone cheer when he was facing the right direction. And he got it like that. And like that, I think, parallels a lot of the types of conversations that you should have with clients. Shitting all over them just isn't going to lead to the result that you think it's going to. I also think that's lazy, to be honest with you. I think it is an emotionally and intellectually lazy response. I think it takes more effort, and I think it's going to yield a better outcome. If you have to have a really difficult conversation, and like you're going to, and I mean like if your client fucking blew it, you can still have that conversation in a way that is caring and is constructive. And ET, I think you had said, approaching with curiosity as well. Like that's part of that. Like I've had clients where they did things that were not in line at all with the goals that they had told me and that we were working towards. And rather than just like, you told me or whatever, I'll just be like, hey, like, what's important to you? Like, does this thing matter more? Does this thing matter more? Like, let's talk through this. And the goal might have changed without us having discussed it. So I think that there's ways of, as Brett was talking about, like, don't be the ski coach that just shouts and shits all over your athletes or your clients. Like, there are ways of navigating those conversations that maybe require a little bit of skill that you have to practice, but the outcome is going to be better if you learn those communication skills.
Perfect. I think we'll wrap it up there. That was really, really, really great. For real. Thank you for that. That was really fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you so much for today. That was really great. Brett, I know you got a jet. So I hope you both have a lovely day. For those that are listening, if you found this episode useful, insightful, interesting, please leave us a comment, whether it be on Spotify or YouTube. We read all of them, we engage with all of them, and they help inform future episodes. And if you liked it, share it with someone that you think would benefit. Hope you guys have a really great day. Till next time. Bye for now.
Adios.